I'm Keith Olbermann, and this is The Resistance. The junior senator from New Mexico asked the assistant director of the FBI's counterintelligence division to explain what the intel services mean when they describe someone as an unwitting agent of a foreign power. The FBI man did so, and then the junior senator from New Mexico followed up accordingly. Quote, by effectively reinforcing the Russian narrative and publicly saying that our system is rigged, did then candidate Trump, now President Trump, become what intelligence officials call an unwitting agent? The FBI man waited fully 7 seconds to answer, and while straining to make his reply, he inadvertently turned off one of the microphones before him at the Senate hearing. Finally, Bill Priestap of the FBI looked at Senator Martin Heinrich and said, I can't really comment on that. In a democracy, in a republic, in a constitutional monarchy, even in an autocracy or kingdom or dictatorship, in any form of national government anywhere that claims to be independent of foreign control, there is only one acceptable answer to the question of whether a former candidate for leadership, now the leader, has become an agent, unwitting or otherwise, of another country. The only acceptable answer is no. Any other answer from any competent authority, and the calamity described by that answer is the gravest that a nation can face, being taken over by another nation. I sat at this desk and warned as long ago as last summer that this was coming. I sat at this desk and insisted as long ago as last autumn that this could be avoided. I sat at this desk and pleaded as long ago as last Thanksgiving that this must be thwarted. I sat at this desk at the time the Flynn Kislyak story was just a tinfoil hat rumor and urged that this be investigated. I have sat at this desk for 130 commentaries and begged that this be understood for what it is. Our willingness to abide the control of this country by Donald Trump and the mercenary gang with which he has surrounded himself was and is and will be in reality our willingness to abide the control of this country by another country. We are at this moment in a position akin to where our founding fathers were, literally under the control of the leaders of a foreign power who have placed at the head of the legal and military forces of this continent a man who is beholden not to us but to them. They, the Russians, may be ruling us, their satellite, the province, formerly known as the United States of America, by active means we know little of. But I do think that is only a remote possibility and, in fact, far more trouble than it would be worth. For them it suffices to have a man in charge who occasionally has a clear thought in his head, like how great it was when the skies here were darkened by the smoke from coal-burning factories, or how great it was here when women had no say in their own lives, or how great it was here when we didn't worry about anybody else's health, or anybody else's safety, or anybody else's education, or anybody else's survival. It suffices to have a man who will view international diplomacy as a business negotiation in which the threats and financial blackmail he used in his business life will also succeed, when in fact they will destroy the influence of this country and enable the other nations of the world to expand their power at the expense of our ability to defend ourselves. In Russia, it suffices to have a man to whom everything, nation, loyalty, freedom, everything is secondary to power and applause, to the point where he cannot conceive of even wondering where the power comes from, nor who it is who is applauding. In essence, Trump asked the FBI director to publicly clear him of what becomes increasingly evident with every passing week, that whether or not he was hands-on enough, or interested enough, or sane enough to understand it, at the very least there was, to quote Trump himself, Russian meddling of election meddling by Russia. The Russians were meddling, unquote. The Russians were meddling to get him elected. Now, seeing only another opportunity for applause, he says it. that he is not mentally competent enough to realize how this implicates him, either directly or simply as the head of the campaign that benefited from the Russian meddling. His apparent inability to understand what he says is irrelevant. He asked the head of the FBI to publicly clear him of the greatest crime in the history of this country, the one that benefited him above all others here. And after the head of the FBI would not do this, he fired him. And then it was revealed he had asked the head of the National Security Agency to publicly clear him of the greatest crime in the history of this country, the one that benefited him above all others here. And the head of the NSA would not do so. And then it was revealed he'd asked the Director of National Intelligence to publicly clear him of the greatest crime in the history of this country, the one that benefited him above all others here, and the DNI would not do so. And then a Democratic senator asked the Assistant Director of the FBI's Counterintelligence Division, its number 2 man on crimes by foreign countries, to clear Trump of the mildest, least egregious, least responsible version of the greatest crime in the history of this country, the one that benefited Trump above all others here, and the FBI man would not do so. None of them would clear him. What other conclusion are we to reach? He says the Russians meddled in the election. He won the election. He is guilty in the best, kindest, most generous, most forgiving interpretation of being too stupid or too crazy to realize that he could have stopped them from taking over our country. The 4th of July is next week. I wonder if by then it will still mean anything in this country. Resist. Peace.